Hello, everybody! Welcome back to More Nintendo Week. I am your host, Colin McIsaac, and as always, I'm joined by Alex Plant.
Vote for me for Smash.
And Ben Moreau.
Live and in the flesh.
Today, we are talking about which characters we want to see as Super Smash Bros. DLC. They released the fighter ballot, yada yada. You should probably know all this. But we're going to talk about which characters we want, which characters we expect, some information on polls, some speculation, some predictions, some, talking about what ways characters might play. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, with that said, let's open it up with the Super Smash Bros. Official website. There are 5 open slots on the website after Mewtwo has been announced. 1 is probably for Lucas, and 4, we think, may go to Smash Bros. DLC characters. It's unclear whether these are just placeholder spots or whether they reserved these spots for DLC characters and just didn't update the code of the website to properly hide them. It's not really worth tons of speculation on. It basically is what it is.
Well, the one thing I'm curious about is, if this is true, if there are going to be 4 more characters, it took them a long time to release Mewtwo, and, it's going to be another long amount of time until Lucas comes out. If they continue at this rate of releasing characters like every 4 to 6 months or something, we could have a couple years of Smash Bros. DLC.
Well, it'll be 2 months between Mewtwo and Lucas.
Right, but we don't know when they started working on Lucas is the thing, because they'll have to start fresh from scratch with all these DLC options.
I think that they've also started on some other DLC already. I'm sure they're working on Wolf, probably a solo ice climber.
And Ridley,
I was
right?
going to say,
just
I'm
based on
guessing
fan
at
reactions.
least 2 of those other slots are probably for other characters, and probably veteran fighters.
Mm-hmm. What I kind of expect, and this is actually a great segue, thank you, Ben. What I kind of expect is this pattern that they'll release 1 more character every 2 to 3 months. And I think that sometimes they're going to correspond with game launches. Like, I think Wolf makes tons of sense to correspond with the release of Star Fox for Wii U. Lucas, we already said, would make so much sense to correspond with a Western Virtual Console release of Mother 3. The jury's still out on that one. But I think that some of them have already begun development, and the ones that they're judging based on the fighter ballot are going to be the ones that come at a later date.
Well, especially since we've established this last time, but the fighter ballot closes in October, so that's way off from now. And I'm sure it would take them time to develop the character after that, so probably at least 6 months after that.
Right. So let's talk about some results from the Smash poll. We held our own poll at Gamnesia.com, and there's also a survey sample from Reddit from Smash Bros. Fans based on who is voting for whom. Here on our own site, Banjo-Kazooie won first place by a really wide margin, by 10% of the vote over the next character, which was Shovel Knight. And then we've got Bayonetta, Isaac, Snake, Rayman, Girahim, so on and so on. We could talk about other characters. But the Reddit one has Shovel Knight in first place with 15% of the vote. Then King K. Rool in second. Then Snake, Isaac, Wolf, Ice Climbers, so forth.
What I like about the Reddit poll is Shrek got 1.71% of the vote.
So some of the interesting things I noticed here is that third-party characters are definitely winning these Smash polls. Shovel Knight has been pretty consistently at or near the top of these polls. Banjo-Kazooie is also a popular choice. The most consistently popular, which I found interesting, was Isaac from Golden Sun, which is a first-party Nintendo IP. He's seems to be the most popular Nintendo character that's making these polls. But whereas characters like Shovel Knight and Banjo-Kazooie have really strong fan bases voting for them, Isaac seems to be the character who nobody disagrees with, and a bunch of people want him, even though it's not enough to make him number 1 or number 2 in any of the polls. He's still getting number 3 or number 4 in just about every single one of them.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's from a franchise that isn't represented yet with a fighter.
Yeah.
And not only that, but he's somewhat similar to a lot of the characters we already have, and so it's easy to imagine him fitting in.
And I think he would also have such a great moveset, and he's a swordsman, he's a mage. The magic and the Jin powers that they have in Golden Sun are really a very different brand of magic that from what we've already seen in Smash and from what we see in a lot of other JRPGs. So I think there's also that aspect that Golden Sun is, such a great series, but also such an imaginative one that would fit really well with the style of Smash.
They definitely have a lot of options for final smashes with Isaac.
Oh my god. Almost too many.
Have to do a separate poll to narrow them down.
They could almost just have like a blanket effect and then just swap in different summon animations.
That I think would be better than having, a specific summon, because that way you can represent more of the characters.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the effect is basically the same, it'd be fair because he wouldn't have too many final smashes, but he'd have really cool visual effects.
So what I also found interesting was, more often than not, newcomers seem to be more popular choices for characters than veteran fighters, like Wolf, like Popo, like Roy. So I wonder how much of this DLC will be veteran fighters versus how much will be newcomers. Because veterans are obviously, like I think we've said before, a lot easier to make for Smash 4 DLC than newcomers are.
Right, Mewtwo and Lucas both recycled their movesets. I mean, there's changes to them, both aesthetically and just based on the footage we've seen, it looks like maybe, they have different ranges or do more or less damage than before, but it's still basically the same moveset, just the physics of it is tweaked
just rebalanced a little.
Yeah.
Which I think is, another thing that can help the release schedule of 2 to 3 months between characters is if they pad out the time between Lucas and whatever the fighter ballot winners are with characters that were cut from past games. The 4 that seem to be the most popular are Wolf, Ice Climber, Snake, and Roy. And obviously Snake, there may be a little bit of contention there about whether or not Nintendo would actually want to do that, because Metal Gear Solid hasn't really been on Nintendo consoles since the GameCube era. The GameCube era is why he got into Smash Bros. In the first place.
Except for the Snake Eater remake on 3DS.
I said really.
He did say consoles. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Although they did recently release a digital version of Snake Eater on the 3DS eShop.
Ooh.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You know what? I think I remember that.
So maybe that's their subtle way of hinting to Nintendo that they really want Snake to be in Smash.
Well, not to mention,
I don't know.
like you said before, he only got in before because, Sakurai and Hideo Kojima are friends and whatnot. And I'm not sure they could do that same arrangement anymore, because I'm not sure Hideo Kojima even exists anymore. No one's seen him in weeks, so.
So I think Snake is an interesting prospect, because so many of the characters that are in Smash Bros. Now seem to be chosen not based on their legacy or their moveset potential, but rather their prominence in Nintendo's current market. So previously, the villager from Animal Crossing, Sakurai said he was considering making villager playable in Brawl, but he couldn't fight well, so that wouldn't work.
Little did he know.
Then New Leaf came out, and villager, obviously in Smash 4, and he's a great character. But at the same time, we also see, a huge crop of characters in this generation for newcomers that seem to be chosen based on their relevance,
like Lucina
far above their
or Robin
uniqueness and their ability to fight.
Oh, well, yeah. If you put it that way, yeah, Duck Hunt would be a good example.
They always have a retro character. It was Ice Climbers, then Pit, then Duck Hunt. Now, I mean, Duck Hunt's not a good example because Duck Hunt is Duck Hunt. But the others, we've got Rosalina, Wii Fit Trainer, Villager, Robin and Lucina, Greninja, all these characters who are really promoting modern generation games.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue to one of the characters that I was thinking of voting for myself, which is the Inklings from Splatoon. Who I think wouldn't get in on the virtue of having a unique moveset, but I think they'd get in on virtue of being sort of a strategic, important property for Nintendo. Mm-hmm. Given that they're getting their own amiibo line and everything. They would have a pretty cool moveset. It'd be nice to, bog people down with ink or speed up by moving through your own ink or something. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But, that's one of the up-and-coming franchises that Nintendo's really trying to push, and it would make sense for them to push it into Smash Bros. As well if they're thinking of adding more characters.
Yeah. I was originally thinking Inklings could be a prime contender, but then...
He had an inkling. I will make that joke every time we bring up the game.
That's okay, Ben. It never gets old. But after seeing the data from, sample surveys of the Smash poll, it seems like nobody's voting for them. So I don't know. I think Nintendo may reconsider that. I think they're obviously going to prioritize a lot of the DLC based on who is voting for what characters rather than what characters make sense in a larger strategy.
Right, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to gain a lot of momentum for characters that aren't playable yet. And this poll's going all the way until October, so people will have had a chance to go hands-on with the Inklings by then. So it's possible we could see things turn around a little bit once that's added to the mix.
Yeah, anyway, but so what characters do we all want to see personally in Smash? Alex, you said Inklings. Are there anyone else? Is there anyone else you want?
Inklings are up there. I actually would like to see Bomberman, and I know he's basically dropped off the history of gaming at this point now that Hudson's gone under. But
wait, what do you mean? There was that awesome gritty reboot for Xbox.
There was. I don't.
Yeah, you haven't heard of this?
No, I
look it up another time.
I'm being.
If you're listening, you should look at it.
I'm being wildly sarcastic.
Oh, well.
So yeah, he'd be one of my picks, but I don't think it's going to happen just because he's in kind of licensing hell probably. I would like to see from on the third party side though, and I think this is possibly realistic. I would like to see a classic Final Fantasy character. So perhaps Moogles or Black Mage, since those are the two standout iconic ones, and they've already appeared in some of the Mario sports crossovers.
3-on-3.
So Nintendo has a history of celebrating these characters, and I think that they would fit in well with the Smash roster given their focus on classic characters.
On the subject of newer characters that are relevant right now, I think Bayonetta...
Captain Toad?
Well, yeah, no, obviously Captain Toad is, Captain Toad is Bay. But
the question is, will Captain Toad be able to jump?
Yeah, he will.
They'll figure out some way to get around that. But I think Bayonetta would be a good choice, just because Bayonetta 2, it got such critical acclaim and everything, but the audience is still kind of small. But Platinum Games has expressed interest in making a Bayonetta 3 for Wii U, and I think including that character in Smash Bros. Would be a really good way of expanding that brand and getting more recognition for the character. But it's already a character that has a really dedicated following. It's just kind of a smaller following. So I think it's a good way of catering to some of the more dedicated fans and also branching out and maybe attracting new fans to the Bayonetta brand.
Bayonetta is actually a very popular choice for the Smash poll. She is fourth in our poll behind Banjo-Kazooie, Shovel Knight, and Other. And she's actually like 6th or 7th in the Reddit poll. But, she still stands out as one of the more popular ones. And, of course, moveset would be easy. The thing I'm concerned about Bayonetta is just this whole sexuality aspect. Because we know that Tharja was originally a trophy. Tharja from Fire Emblem Awakening was originally a trophy in the 3DS version. But her outfit was deemed too revealing by the ESRB, and Nintendo had to take it out if they wanted to get an, I think, E10 plus rating is what Smash Bros. Is.
Yeah.
So adding Bayonetta may bring up some complications with the ESRB. And
well, especially
Tharja's outfit isn't that revealing, especially compared to someone whose clothes come off when she attacks.
Well, it's not even just the outfits. It's the fact that her provocative animations, I guess, are so much...
Her whole personality is very overtly sexual.
Precisely, yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. It's just something that I think Nintendo wants to avoid in their... Or is hoping to avoid in their fighting game. Because it's a very campy, cartoony, aimed at kids kind of thing. And someone like Bayonetta, her nature as a character just inherently conflicts with that.
Yeah, and they're very faithful to how these characters are originally depicted, so I don't think that they'd do some kind of toned-down version of Bayonetta either.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and, I would like to see Bayonetta in Smash, but I just don't think Nintendo would.
Yeah, it might not be very realistic.
Is the only issue. Yeah. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's sort of weird that they're finally opening up something like this, because it feels like all the top standout picks I had when I was going into Smash 4, when they first announced it, are already in the game. Like my original top picks were Palutena, Pac-Man, and there's someone else who actually got in, and I can't remember who it was.
Aren't you lucky? My top picks were Waluigi, Paper Mario, King K. Rool, Isaac, Girahim. Mewtwo is finally back, but still, that was a little touchy. So I was not feeling it. Even with Shulk in the game, I was not feeling it.
You bring up Paper Mario, and something we've talked about in previous podcasts is that There may or may not be a new Paper Mario game in development for Wii U. You know, the developer that makes Paper Mario has been working on a Wii U game, which they haven't revealed yet. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you brought up the idea of releasing Smash characters to coincide with new games. I think it would be great to get Paper Mario as a DLC character in Smash Bros. Right as a new Paper Mario game launches alongside Wii U.
And you have no idea how badly I want Paper Mario in Smash.
Yeah, his moveset would be spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, so, well, do you guys want to talk about, like, movesets for potential characters? Because, you know, there's a lot of stuff to discuss.
It's one of those awkward conversations where I know inevitably anything that I could imagine would be very far off what actually happens. So I don't put a tremendous, like Pac-Man, for example, a couple of his moves that involved him chomping things were totally things I would have imagined, but then you have
I never could have seen that Final Smash coming.
Oh, I'm thinking of the fire hydrant, because I never played Pac-Land. Who played Pac-Land?
Right.
Really sad that was a stage, too.
Yeah, oh god, don't get me started on that. It looks like it was made in MS Paint.
He started on it.
You already got me started. But yeah, I mean, movesets are definitely tricky. But I feel like characters like Paper Mario, like Shovel Knight, maybe even King K. Rool, who already have like very distinct movesets in their games that would be very easy to translate into Smash Bros. I think those we can make some, you know, pretty safe guesses on.
Well, what kind of character do you have in mind that you'd like to
I don't know.
dream up?
So like Paper Mario, for example, like a B-side would be like he stomps on one of the turtle buddies and, you know, smashes him forward. His B would be a hammer. His roll would be the actual paper tube thing.
That'd be great.
Recovery would be the paper airplane from Thousand Year Door. Like his standing dodge animation would be the paper ability from Thousand Year Door.
Colin has an entire fanfic written out about this.
No, I just mean it's easy to come up with things like this. Shovel Knight, for example, like the B move could just be digging the shovel and sending that shockwave out. Side smash could be like that charged shovel attack, would work kind of like Meta Knights. Recovery would be that propeller knight, I think it is, that has like the sword who like flies in the air. I don't know, but I just mean there's a lot of opportunity for these very distinct movesets to work in Smash Bros. Similarly to the way they do in the games.
Well, I mean, if you're going to go there, Inkling, they could do a thing where you spray a wall and then you can basically walk up the wall in squid form.
There are no walls in Smash Bros, though.
Yeah, there are. On some stages.
Not many.
I mean, it wouldn't just be walls. It'd be floors, bottoms of stages, maybe. I don't know. I don't know how you'd spray those, but...
Maybe. I don't know. I think Inkling is a lot harder to think of something for.
Paint roller.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of tools that you get to, like paint roller. That's a good example. You know, bouncing over to your teammates if you're in a team battle. I think it could be a very specialized character in a way that a lot of Smash Bros. Characters can't be right now.
So, were you guys terrible people like me, and did you go and vote for, like, obnoxious fake characters that'll never possibly get in?
No.
Oh, maybe I'm the only one.
Unless you count Waluigi.
So
a lot of people count Waluigi, but I don't. I want Waluigi.
It's funny that you mentioned that, though, because I've been kind of wondering, like, if they get a lot... I mean, they're bound to get a lot of submissions, but if they get, like, a lot of submissions that kind of almost make it, do you think they'll introduce an update with more assist trophies?
I think that's very likely, honestly. I was surprised at how few assist trophies there were.
How few new ones, you mean? Yeah.
Well... I mean, both.
Really?
I was expecting a lot. Yeah,
I felt like there were a lot
more,
especially given how many Pokemon there are.
I don't know. I feel like there were about the same amount as there were in Brawl, and there were a lot of them that were cut from Brawl, and I feel like there were about the same number introduced in Smash 4. That said, I don't play with items on all that much, so it's been a while since I've seen, you know.
Maybe they added more items, and that's what I'm thinking of.
But I think they just. It doesn't seem like there are that many more characters introduced to me. But it's really weird to me that we don't have like a Donkey Kong character assist trophy. We don't have we don't have a lot of assist trophies for characters that I really would have expected. We got Takamaru, we got Dylan, but I'm surprised there's no like Chibi Robo. I'm surprised they got rid of the custom Robo assist trophy. I'm surprised that there's no sort of Pushmo kind of thing going on or Harmonite. It's just there seems to be a lot of stuff that's missing from their current assist trophy lineup that I think, especially given all the playable character requests, they may introduce some more.
Yeah, especially I hope so. Especially compromise. Especially if they add new franchises, that'd be really nice.
Mm-hmm. But that could also be a great way to introduce, if they don't make playable characters of Toad and Inklings and stuff, that would be a great way to put those sort of newer characters into the game. Because it doesn't seem like there is a lot of enthusiasm for, well, Toad and Inklings specifically. They are important enough characters, I think, to Nintendo's current strategy that it would make sense to include them in some fashion.
Right. You mentioned no Donkey Kong Assist trophies, so that raised a question for me. So who do we think is more likely to be a playable character, Dixie Kong or Cranky Kong?
More likely to be playable character, I would imagine Dixie Kong. I would hope Cranky Kong, because I personally love Cranky Kong. But if we're talking about Donkey Kong playable characters, it's so obviously King K. Rool.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I used to think that he and Dixie Kong were kind of neck and neck for that spot, but then Smash 4 came along and neither of them got in, which I'm still shocked by. But either way, after the fan poll, it's so clear that King K. Rool is by far the more popular Donkey Kong character.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there are just so few villains represented in Smash Bros.
Right. They got rid of one of the villains from Brawl. I think there are actually fewer villains now in Smash 4 than there were in Brawl, which is shocking.
I guess the good guys are winning.
Oh my god.
Well, they're also fighting each other, so they're bound to kill each other off at some point.
Yeah, they're just training.
So I think that is part of it. But King K. Rool also, he's a very character-y character. And Donkey Kong is a very character-y series. And it's weird that it doesn't have more than 2 characters when it's A, so character-y, and B, their 4th best-selling franchise.
Yeah.
It's
and plus,
really
like,
weird.
Funky Kong, okay?
Oh, le, 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 le. Yeah, I don't want that to happen. So Banjo-Kazooie has been a really, really popular suggestion. Like I said, on our poll, it's number 1. People have been so hyped now that Phil Spencer said it would be cool, there would be no licensing trouble. And obviously, Banjo and Kazooie are such perfect fits for the rest of the Nintendo cast. The question is whether they're still likely. Before Phil Spencer said this stuff, people, it seemed, really wanted Banjo-Kazooie, but had kind of sheltered their hopes deep down, locked in these dungeons of emotion, never seeing the light of day, because Banjo and Kazooie were a Microsoft character, and there's no way that Microsoft would let their character into Smash. But Phil Spencer said this stuff, those dungeon emotions have been unleashed, and there's a real hype train for Banjo-Kazooie and Smash, and I think it's worth asking the question, is it likely? Obviously it would be fantastic, but is it likely?
I think it's possible, but I don't think it's likely. Like you said earlier, a big focus for which characters Nintendo chooses to put in, it seems to be that a big focus is on what's relevant right now, what they can do, what characters they can put in that relate to current brands. And it's just been so long since Banjo-Kazooie was a Nintendo IP that I don't necessarily see them doing it. And I also don't think it helps. It would help Microsoft maybe more than it would help Nintendo to include them. So including them would pretty much just be a favor to fans, and it would be a pretty awesome favor. And there is a lot of support for it, but I don't know if it's enough support that it would really warrant Nintendo actually doing it.
Right. So I mean, there's this aspect that they are including characters that help cross-promote other brands. And like you said, I think really the only benefit that Nintendo would get out of that deal is sales on the Banjo-Kazooie DLC. Now, Banjo-Kazooie DLC would probably be the best-selling of all the DLC. It would probably make a lot of money for Nintendo, but it would end there. They wouldn't really have that cross-promotion aspect anymore, and like you said, it would be sort of more of a favor to Microsoft. So that's, I think, what's barring them from Nintendo wanting to do it. Now, what I think could be really interesting, and it's never going to happen, but is if Nintendo and Microsoft worked out a sort of deal where maybe they could release Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie on the Virtual Console for Wii U, or maybe even go into some sort of publishing or licensing agreement, because let's face it, Banjo and Kazooie on Xbox is a mutually detrimental relationship, because Banjo fans are all on Nintendo platforms, and Xbox fans couldn't care less about Banjo-Kazooie. So the franchise is losing out as a result, and Xbox isn't getting any of the new consumers that it hopes to get through Banjo-Kazooie. because it's so greatly conflicting with the rest of the Xbox identity.
Yeah, you kind of arrived where I was heading myself. I think that something like that, where they have that kind of agreement that Banjo-Kazooie is going to be a franchise that touches Nintendo platforms and not just Xbox, that would have to be in place before you'd see Banjo-Kazooie hit Smash Bros. And I don't think it's likely. I think it would be very healthy for Banjo-Kazooie and for Microsoft even.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that would benefit Microsoft more than keeping Banjo-Kazooie exclusive to.
Well, I mean, and
Xbox
they're not keeping a lot of their games Xbox exclusive at this point. They're putting a lot of them on Windows, so it's not even like.
Well,
they're...
I mean, that's also
yeah,
Microsoft,
but they don't.
though.
It's not really their platform, in the sense that they don't make any revenue. They don't make any royalties off of game sales on their on Windows. Not that they make royalties off first party titles anyway, but it's not. It's not the same kind of platform as Xbox. They're certainly not, contributing to the popularity of Xbox by releasing something on Windows.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it seems like Banjo and Kazooie would be fantastic by every measure, a perfect fit for Smash. But I think we agree that Nintendo probably wouldn't really be interested.
I could see Nintendo saying something like, "We already have Duck Hunt. We don't need another character that's a bird and a furry creature."
Another furry in Smash. What about Shovel Knight then? Shovel Knight has an immense amount of support, so much more than I expected, and he seems to be leading just about every survey sample.
I think Shovel Knight gets
for this thing.
That's just my gut feeling.
Yeah, I mean, so Shovel Knight is interesting because he's this really, really Nintendo-y character that launched on Nintendo consoles, and I would venture to say that is the most successful launch of a new IP
on a Nintendo platform.
Well,
this
right,
generation.
but I would say the most successful launch of a new character series in my lifetime on Nintendo platforms. Granted, I'm kind of young, but still, Shovel Knight is just shockingly popular in so little time, and would represent a great gesture on Nintendo's part to the indie community to say, look, we value what we're doing, we want to work with you guys more and more, and we appreciate that you're making such great characters that get popular on Nintendo consoles. And I think having that really strong connection that they had with Shovel Knight with the year of Wii U and 3DS exclusivity really solidifies the likelihood of that. And until the polls, I didn't think that Shovel Knight had a chance in hell. Because why would all of these Japanese development teams see any value in a character that is getting 90% of its sales from the West? But this has really gone to show how monumentally popular Shovel Knight is in the West.
And not only that, but how monumentally popular these kinds of styles of games are, even when they come out of the West. And that's something that Nintendo really needs to step up, is reaching out to Western developers. And I know they've already been, you mentioned this already, but they're already trying to do that with indies. And what better way to really show that they're serious about it, serious about partnering with Western developers, than to bring a Western character, a Western third-party indie character into Smash.
Right. And Shovel Knight, of course, would have, fantastic moveset potential. We kind of just talked about this a little bit earlier.
It'd be a good, more melee, I say more melee because obviously not full melee, but more melee counterpart to Mega Man, who's very range-oriented.
So do we all agree then that we think Shovel Knight's going to get in?
Yeah, I think so.
I would say of all the third-party characters, he's probably the most likely.
Yeah, interesting.
And given that they've specifically said they're open to third-party characters.
Right. All right, so I was thinking it would be fun to play a little game where we all make predictions of what the final outcome of the DLC is going to look like, and whoever is closest to right by the end of the DLC period gets some sort of prize. We'll figure that out later. I haven't thought that far ahead, but what do you guys think? Should we do it?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, so who wants to go first?
You go first.
What are you going to predict? Me?
Yeah, Mr. Podcast Master.
Well, here's my predictions for this thing. And keep in mind, this is mostly just for fun. We're going to see who's closest to being right. But this is what I think it's going to end up looking like. In addition to Mewtwo and Lucas, we're going to see 6 DLC characters. I think 3 of those are going to be veteran fighters, and I think 3 of those are going to be newcomers. So the veteran fighters, I think, will be Wolf, Solo Popo, with Nana as an alt, of course, And of course, given appropriate buffs to make him viable as a single character, and Roy from Fire Emblem. And I think these are going to generally release sooner than the newcomers will, because it's just a lot quicker and easier to develop and rebalance a veteran fighter than it is to build from scratch and then balance a newcomer. So I think those are going to be our 3 DLC veteran fighters. I think Wolf is probably going to launch around the same time as Star Fox U. I think Roy is just going to come whenever. Maybe they'll put Sword of Seals on Wii Virtual Console in Japan or something. And Popo maybe alongside Ice Climber on that's actually already out on Virtual Console, isn't it?
Pretty sure it is.
And I think the 3 newcomers are going to be Shovel Knight, Isaac from Golden Sun, because we already talked about that earlier, and King K. Rool. And I think that's going to round out the total DLC roster. I think DLC is probably going to continue until about a year from now. Maybe at the latest I would peg until next November. And I think, of course, all the veterans are going to have the same movesets.
So your predictions are far, far more detailed than mine will be. But I agree with you on Wolf and Single Ice Climber. And I also agree with you on Shovel Knight. I don't agree on King K. Rool or Isaac. I think we'll see Inklings get in. I think Nintendo's going to try to promote that. And this is more of a hope than a reality, but I'll say Paper Mario for my last one.
All right. So you still think there are going to be 6?
That's just
that was
that's
5.
just all I could think of off the top of my head for good choices.
Do you disagree on Roy too?
Like I said, much less thoroughly researched than yours.
So I agree that Wolf will almost definitely be in. I'm not so sure I agree that Popo will be in, just because I think if they had a solution like that in mind for Ice Climbers, we would have seen it already. But at the same time, a lot of the veteran fighters they're bringing back were otherwise cut characters, so it's possible.
Well, I don't know. I think because of the backlash that they got from Ice Climbers not being in the game, that they're gonna want to reintroduce them. I think you're right that if we were gonna see a solution, we'd have seen it by now. But I also think that they are rethinking not having introduced that solution in the first place, because I'm sure they came up with that solution and decided against it. But I think now they're rethinking that decision because just of, the uproar over Ice Climbers being cut.
And maybe there's a caveat to me thinking they won't get in, and that's I think they will only be brought back if they can be brought back in their original form in some fashion. And whether that means that they can't be on original 3DS but can only be on new 3DS, or whether that means they just are only on Wii U, I don't know. But I don't think they're going to make some drastic change to Ice Climbers to get them to fit on the 3DS version. I think if they're going to bring them back, they're going to bring them back in their original form. Okay. But for that reason, I also don't think they're especially likely. I agree that Shovel Knight, however, is probably the most likely newcomer from a third-party perspective. I also agree with Ben that I think Nintendo is going to heavily push the Inklings because they're pushing Splatoon, and then that means they're probably even already planned to be in the game. But as for my wild card newcomer guess, I think they'll do something kind of unexpected. I think they'll pick
Mike Jones?
No,
Mike
I think
Tyson.
they'll actually.
My friend Mike.
Yeah, closer. No, I think they'll do Chorus Men actually from Rhythm Heaven, and I only say that because they were so heavily rumored during some of the early stages of Smash rumors, and especially since Rhythm Heaven is such a big franchise in Japan, I think it might actually get in.
Interesting. So you think they're really only doing one character based on the fighter ballot?
Yeah, I think they'll most likely only do one character based on the fighter ballot.
Okay. All right. So on that note, I believe we are done. Does anyone have anything else to say?
No, I'm hungry.
Does anyone else want to talk about the glory that is Waluigi?
Wah!
I take that as a no. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. This is the end of Nintendo Week for today. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to us on iTunes or subscribe to us on YouTube at Gamnesia TV for bite-sized discussions from the show. And please head to iTunes to leave us a review. It really helps with visibility. We greatly appreciate it. We've been getting some great feedback from you guys, and it really warms our heart to read it. So thank you so much. And if you have not reviewed us yet already, please go ahead and do. If you can't wait till next week for more of our stuff, you can head to Gamnesia.com to see more gaming news as it happens. We have Sony, Microsoft, Indie, you name it, and even Nintendo news that didn't have time to be discussed on this week's show. If you have any questions or feedback for Nintendo Week, please send it to Colin at Gamnesia.com. That's COLIN at Gamnesia.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you have another great week.